Hey guys, Cashew. Last video I talked about Zed, who's been around for forever, but is very in and out of the meta and very abusable when certain metas come up, like the lethality meta, for example. He's very polarizing, and he doesn't show up much in pro play. I want to talk about the champs that do. So I'm going to start calling them Evergreen champions, and by Evergreen, what I mean is they are around all the time. They're always relevant in the meta. They're always worth paying attention to, thinking about. Pro players will always look at drafting them, and especially if there are certain metas that already favor the character, they will excel. So, good examples of this involve Orianna in the mid lane, Jarvan in the jungle, Ornn, Jax in the top lane, ADC, Jinx, Xayah, and support, Rel fits into their Braum, Nautilus, Leona. A lot of supports fit into this, actually, but the idea of an evergreen champion, like what makes a champion able to be played so often, so much. And I'm gonna start with Orianna because I like this character. Background footage is very poorly played Orianna game in my opinion, but it's fine. Don't worry about that. I'm just here to talk. So Orianna has a very, very simple kit. Her passive makes her slightly better at last hitting and extended auto attack trades. She's not good at it, but she does beat mages. It's magic damage on hit. Her Q, short, cooldown, medium range, medium damage ability that allows her to hit her W, which is a medium cooldown, high damage, very small ability. It's very precise, so you have to aim your Q very accurately. But your Q doesn't just do damage, it puts a ball down. And the ball is a zoning tool. So right off the bat, we have one of the first pieces of Evergreen Champion kits, which is normally that they have a specific range that you are very heavily forced to respect. Orianna, even in lane, that's her Q range. If you play inside her Q range, every time her Q's up, you're going to take damage. She's one of the only mid laners that takes Aerie because she's one of the only champions that can pocket over and over again much faster than if Comet would come up, right? She can make better use of Aerie than Comet because she can just proc it so much more. And she has this constant harass available to her. Her E is a defensive tool, gives her a little bit of extension of a health bar, which is very relevant because it means that just unlike some other mages, she actually doesn't die quite as easily to ganks. It just gives her a little bit of extra health when she gets dove into, both for short trades, for push, for poke that beats her, right? And that's another mechanic that you see all the time with Evergreen characters. They have something in their kit that makes it very hard to actually, beat them, right? They have very small counterplay windows, and the counterplay windows they have, there are things in their kit that allow them to close those counterplay windows, typically through numbers, right? And for Orianna, that's getting just enough shield and being able to buy Archangels and Zhonya's, tanky mage items, to survive dives. She's mage, but she can survive dives. That's pretty scary, right? And she can still do her job with these, more defensively oriented items if she needs to. Her job is her ult. So all of the rest of her kit involves moving her ball around, and her ult is one giant shockwave, right? It is a button that does about the same damage as her W, but in a much larger radius, and it groups everyone it hits. That is insane, right? The only other champion I can think of that does that instantly is Yone. Rel has a pole, right? Other characters have displacements on their ults, but Orianna can group instantly a number of characters within a range. And this is one of the most important things that Evergreen characters have, right? They have something that allows somebody else to play off them. In a couple cases, that's going to be non-standard. Like I mentioned Jax, that's map pressure. There's a very specific kind of map pressure that Jax puts out, and I'll talk about that at some point. But for now, Orianna, what she does is she allows her range to be extended by her teammates, and in turn, the CC that she gives is so incredibly powerful for a team that you have to play around it at all times as the enemy team. Anytime that Orianna ball hits, it's going to win a fight, right? If she hits 3 people with her shockwave and the fight is even, the fight is now won. That's just kind of how the champ works. Everybody kind of knows if Orianna hits her button, that's it. What else are you going to do? You can't do anything. She just did half of 3 people's HP and stacked them all together. So that's what an Evergreen character is. In my Zed video, I mentioned counterplay windows and opportunity cost, right? This is another thing that Evergreen champions have. They typically have very, very low opportunity cost to perform their required action. Sometimes even 0. In an Orianna's case, it's basically just being in range of your Q, right? That's about it. You could say, having to build ability haste is a opportunity cost, but not really. Airy, technically, because it doesn't do as much damage mid to late game, but her kit has really good AP ratios and a low cooldown on her Q, so that kind of makes up for it. That she is a zone control team fight mage with consistent damage thanks to her low Q cooldown and her auto attack buff that provides utility in a shield, a slow/buffed movement speed thing, which allows people to catch or gap close or get away from things surprisingly often, and one of the best crowd control buttons in the game. So that's what an Evergreen character is, right? And if it doesn't make sense why I'm saying, oh, this is like omnipresent, all powerful, think of the sheer number of Oriannas you've seen in pro play. The number of shockwaves. Faker Shockwave will find them all, right? Orianna shows up all the time. She's in some of the most iconic team fights, some of the most iconic Worlds performances. She got a World skin in Season 2, and she's still not only relevant, but sometimes really powerful. I want to say this was last season in the middle of the season when mages were considered much stronger than average thanks to some specific item positioning, and Orianna was one of the best characters in the game. It was an Ori Syndra meta, right? Syndra, we can talk about later. And like, this champion has received very close to 0 changes mechanically. A lot of older characters have received updates to their mechanics. Orianna's only mechanic update that she has ever received, besides changing damage scalings and stuff, is that her E no longer gives her armor and magic resist, which is very powerful. Passive armor and MR is very scary. They haven't taken anything else. They haven't added anything else. This is just the champion. And she was fine in Season 1, but she's fine in Season 15. So how does that work, right? Let's take it apart. Orianna does not necessarily have what you might call a weakness, and that's a really, really strong statement, but let's talk about it. All of her damage can be done in melee range or at her max range, right? All of it's based around the ball can be put at her max range, so she's not limited by one of her skills having longer range than others or being harder to hit than others. If you can hit her Q, or if you walk into melee range and you can hit the E coming back to you, or if she can E to a teammate, she can guaranteed connect all of her damage off that one moment, and it can be anywhere. So she has a large effect radius, and positioning within that effect radius doesn't lower her effectiveness. She can play at a very long range in team fights, so that's number 2. She is a very, very safe champion. She can play at the range of her E's tether, right? As long as one other person on her team is able to go in, she can capitalize on that as well as any other teamfight champ has ever done. And in fact, she normally plays with those teamfight champions, right? You see the ball delivery service, right? Zac, Nocturne, Jarvan, Vi, all these junglers that have massive engage ranges. You put the ball on the champ goes in. They don't even have to hit it because Orianna presses R and wins the game for them. The third thing they do, right? Orianna has damage consistently. Not only do all of her abilities have access to damage in the same range, her Q cooldown is very low. Most Orianna builds end up with her Q under a 2-second cooldown. That's really low for mages. It's not Karthus, but she has DPS. So even if you're able to survive her burst, if you build magic resist to get through her glass cannon damage, she's not actually a glass cannon, right? She's able to still put out consistent DPS and threaten them. You can see, yeah, my gameplay's pretty bad in the background, but you can see that I'm consistently able to poke and trade with the Yasuo, right? Bad flash. There's not a point where I stop doing something to his health bar, right? And that's what Orianna does. She has this crazy uptime. And that uptime, that lowered counterplay window, is what makes a lot of these Evergreen champions so scary. You never stop being scared of them. They never stop being a threat. And then maybe the final thing is that they're able to use basically every type of item within their class effectively. So no matter what items are meta at the time, or no matter what runes, this applies to runes as well, are meta at the time, something can work, right? Orianna has a very clear 3-hit combo, so she can use Electrocute. She has long-range poke consistently, so she can use both Airy and Comet. She is very good at running away and getting something out of those extended trades. Remember that low CDR, so she can take Phase Rush, right? If you need to take a defensive rune, if you have a defensive meta, Ori doesn't need the mana sustain from her tree because she is happy with a tier item, maybe 2 even. So you're totally fine to take Resolve, right? Ori already likes Teleport and Ghost and Barrier, so any defensive sum or, if macro, if Teleport is currently meta, which it has been for a long time, you can just slam that, right? And for items, all Ori wants is something that gives mana. That's it. That's her entire requirement. Ori has been good with builds like Luden's Shadowflame Deathcap Voidstaff. no ability haste, right? She's been good with things like Leandry's and multiple haste items, right? Archangel's Cosmic Drive. She has been good with everything. She has consistent spell application for things like Leandry's. She has high damage spell application for Magic Pin, Shadow Flame, right? She has range, which means things like Ludens can be frustrating because she can get those longer range pokes. And of course, she has really good scalings and reasonable base damage, so things like Death Cap and Void Staff are always great on her. It is impossible to have a game state where Orianna cannot do something unless the game state is focused on something besides team fighting. And in fives, that's not impossible, but it's pretty damn rare. So this is what an Evergreen champion is, right? Why is this fair, right? How is this champion balanced? Well, for one, her base damages are really low in the early game. Her passive technically allows her to beat mages in auto duels, but she definitely can't beat a Yasuo. She can't even beat other AD champions that don't build attack speed, right? It's just enough to allow her to last hit a little easier and to outtrade champs that otherwise shouldn't be allowed to get into that range. Basically, she can't lose an auto duel to someone 500 health lower than her because they have second wind. She does need often to buy a defensive item, so she often needs Archangels or Zhonya's. If she doesn't buy those things, and she gets CC'd once, just like any other mage, she will die, right? She also has a maximum range, and in fives, it's very, very hard to, like, mitigate that weakness, or to exploit that weakness, because most of the champions that you want to play, if you're playing something that has long enough range to abuse Orianna, you're probably giving something else up. And in return, if you're doing it in solo queue, you are putting a higher execution floor and ceiling on yourself, right? Orianna is not hard. She is complex in her positioning and her timing, but she isn't hard. It's not hard to do a bunch of damage on Orianna. It's not hard to wave clear on Orianna. This is a side note, but that's something else that should be mentioned. For mid laners, Evergreen implies very good wave clear, and Orianna has very, very good wave clear. Her shield lets her trade well in short trades, but if she doesn't have numbers, if you've already found some sorts of advantages against her, her shield definitely doesn't actually let her win short trades versus good short trade champions. She has to find a way to chase you, get extra autos, get her second Q, space you out properly, right? And then Orianna becomes a very, very high skill, movement intensive character. So you can beat Orianna with movement. You can beat Orianna with champion picks. You can beat her by diving onto her. But at the end of the day, all of this is just ways you beat League of Legends players. And what Orianna really doesn't have is something broken. In solo queue, Orianna does not have a thing. There is no knowledge check. Besides just, like, how much damage does she do? What's her range? Like, Zed is a great example of a knowledge check. Zed has his ultimate, and guessing, predicting, and knowing how Zed's ult works, when to use it, how to space abilities around it, bait it out, all of these things affect Zed's ability to be strong and good at killing you. Orianna doesn't really have that. She has a giant indicator on her only button, and it doesn't have any depth to it, right? Flash the ult, dodge the ult, whatever. Can you dive onto her? Yeah, then you're probably able to kill her. Don't dive onto her? Okay, play safe, try to mitigate her poke, right? And that's maybe the last thing about most of these Evergreen champions. They rarely do something you're not expecting. Even if their, like, actual execution of what they're doing is very, very hard. Azir's a great example. Azir is incredibly difficult to play perfectly, mechanically, but you know what Azir can do. Anybody who's played against a relatively powerful Azir or watched pro play knows that Azir has the shuffle, right? That's it. It's the shuffle, right? Orianna has the shockwave. They don't have the same other stuff. You don't have Akshan doing 3,000 damage in one mid-game fight by just swinging 5 times, right? You don't have Sylas healing his entire health bar with 2 Ws, and it feels like he should be dying, but he's not, and I'm losing my mind because the cooldown's like, no, there's none of that, right? Orianna just does what Orianna does. And I think this is some of the best champ design in the game. So, I love talking about these characters. I think it's really interesting. And I think talking about the little pieces of why they're good makes it much easier to figure out why you want to play someone, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think this gets talked about much, but finding new characters is really valuable in League. It makes the game more fun, having something new to play, right? And if you can define what is fun about a character, you can find other characters that do something similar. Yeah, that's it. there's plenty of other things about Orianna. Actually, you just saw that last thing. Maybe this is the last thing I want to mention, but Orianna has vision control. All her Q, and by extension her entire kit, can check bushes or hold bushes, and that's very powerful. Didn't even really mention that. That her ball is this crazy zoning tool. No, I did. Anyway, I don't want to ramble too much. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to make more of these. If you have a particular champion you're curious about, whether they're evergreen or not, and maybe how they could be, what could be changed, what's unhealthy or too healthy about their design, yeah, let me know. Thanks. See you guys later.